Hello? Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, we don't need the microphone. This is just sort of before we get started. Did people hear that Bill Gates bought the Seattle Times this morning? He buys it every morning. Thank you. Some people are a little slower on the uptake than others. I know it's late. The title of this talk, Meet Your Meat. I grew up in Minnesota and Oklahoma. I grew up fishing. I grew up with the belief that there were two food groups, that they were Dairy Queen and McDonald's. I went to college at a liberal arts school in Iowa. And when I got there, I met some vegetarians and some vegans. This was 22 years ago now. And the first time somebody told me, he doesn't eat meat, I thought he was on some, wacky Hindu fast or something. But you don't eat meat, what do you eat? I really treated it like he said, I don't breathe oxygen. You don't eat meat, then you starve, right? And I think that's true of a lot of people. We grow up eating meat, we grow up eating dairy, we grow up eating eggs, and we don't really ever stop, take a step back, and ask what the consequences are. What are the things you're supporting when you sit down and you have a bucket of chicken or a burger or a pork chop? You're just eating, right? Well, the question that veganism poses to all of us is the question that Socrates asked 2,500 years ago, or the statement that Socrates made 2,500 years ago, when he said, the unexamined life is not worth living. All philosophy for the last 2,500 years has basically been commentary on this concept, that the unexamined life is not worth living. What veganism does is it challenges us to lead an examined life. It challenges us to think about the practical ramifications of the choices that we're making. Because the reality is, whether you are personally slitting the animal's throat, or wasting the food, or taking the food out of the mouths of the global poor, that's the practical ramifications every single time you choose to eat meat. You're not personally doing it, you're just eating some chicken or some pork or some fish, right? Except that it's basically a mercenary relationship in which you are. So I'm going to talk about what I believe are three independent categorical imperatives in favor of the vegan diet. Once you start examining where meat comes from, if you care about the environment, if you care about the global poor, or if you care about animals, and certainly if you care about all three, the only diet with integrity is the vegan one. The first argument is environmentalism. And this is the one that did it for me 22 years ago. I've been vegan for years before I even considered the animal argument. And this is the basic intuitive fact that it takes a lot of calories into an animal to get 1 calorie back out in the form of that animal's flesh. So I weigh about 185, 190 pounds. If I do nothing but lie in bed watching Jerry Springer reruns, I'm going to burn like 2,000 calories a day. Except when I'm going, Jerry, 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 and then it ticks up a little bit when I get really excited. And that's true of chickens and pigs and cattle. It's true of all farmed animals. And not that they have the bad taste to watch Jerry Springer reruns, but that the vast majority of the calories that you feed to an animal, the animal expends simply existing. According to the United Nations, it's an average of about 20 calories into an animal to get 1 calorie back out, which just makes sense. You have to raise the animal. If it's a chicken for 7 weeks, if it's a pig for 6 months, if it's a cow for 1.5 to 2 years, you have to raise that animal. The vast majority of what you feed to that animal, the cow expends simply existing, or the chicken or the pig, just like you would. And then some of it goes into things we don't eat, like feathers, or blood, or bones. So it's a vastly inefficient system, and that's just the intuitive, calories in, calories out. Is there anybody in here who would go to your refrigerator, open it up, take out 10 plates of pasta and dump them in the trash? No. Every once in a while somebody raises their hand, but nobody in this room raised their hand. That's the practical decision that you're making. It's a mercenary relationship. You're not personally doing it. But each time you choose to eat chicken or pork or beef, you are effectively throwing away the vast majority of the caloric inputs of that food. Except that it's quite a bit worse than that. And people oftentimes point out what's true, which is that vegan food also requires a lot of water, requires a lot of energy, causes a lot of pollution. You have to till the crops, you have to water the crops, you have to ship the crops to the feed mill, you have to operate the feed mill, not the feed mill, you have to ship the crops to wherever you're going to turn them into some wonderful vegan food like Budweiser. Beer is vegan, thank goodness. So you still have to grow the crops, and that's energy intensive and polluting. You still have to ship the crops on gas guzzling pollution spewing vehicles to whatever, Anheuser-Busch or whatever factory you're going to turn it into, some wonderful vegan food. You still have to ship that vegan food on gas guzzling pollution spewing vehicles to the grocery store. You still have to operate the grocery store. Veganism is not about purity, it's about doing the best you can. The reality is that it takes all of those stages, plus about 4 times as many additional stages if you're going to eat meat. You still have to grow those crops, but now you're shipping the crops to a feed mill. You're operating the feed mill. And then you're shipping the feed to a factory farm, and you're operating the factory farm. Then you're shipping the animals to the slaughterhouse, and you're operating the slaughterhouse. So all of that gas guzzling, pollution spewing vehicles, there are about 4 extra stages, as well as a factory farm and a feed mill that don't exist if you're not eating animal products. Once you crunch the numbers, what you find, according to John Robbins in the book The Food Revolution, is that it takes about 20 times the fossil fuels to get a calorie from animal products than to get a calorie from vegan products. It takes about 14 times the water and about 25 times as much land. So environmentally speaking, there's really nothing else that we're doing that is this environmentally catastrophic relative to another choice that we can make. And even if you don't care about animals, every time you sit down to eat, most of us are trying to lead lives that are more environmental. Even just looking at your carbon footprint, you can cut it to 1/9 by going from your typical meat eater to your typical vegetarian, according to nutritional scientists at Cornell. The UN crunched the numbers. They produced this report, Livestock's Long Shadow. Comes in at about 408 pages, and in the introduction they say point blank that eating animals is one of the most significant contributors to the most serious environmental problems at every scale, from local to global. Eating meat contributes to problems of land degradation, climate change and air pollution, water shortage and water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. And in fact, on the hot topic in the environmental community today, global warming, they say that eating meat causes about 40% more global warming than all of the SUVs, all of the 18-wheelers, all of the cars, all of the trains, all of the planes, all transport combined. The meat industry, it's the #1 cause of global warming, and again, about 40% more than transportation. Environmentally speaking, you really can't say you care about the environment and then get into this mercenary relationship where you're not personally trampling with combat boots over the earth, but if you're eating animal products, that's effectively what you're doing. I mean, for me, 22 years ago, it was this. I considered myself the Bejo environmentalist. It was this combined with this next point. The fact that eating animals starves the global poor. The World Watch says meat production is an inefficient use of grain. The grain is used more efficiently when consumed directly by humans. Continued growth of meat output is dependent on feeding rates of animals, creating competition for grain between affluent meat eaters and the world's poor. I'm sure most people here have been following the biofuels controversy, right? The environmental community tends to be pro-biofuel because it cuts down on global warming. The global poverty community tends to be anti-biofuel because it takes grain and corn that could be fed to human beings and funnels it into our gas tanks. And in fact, the UN Global Envoy on Food called it a human rights crime. That we would take 100 million tons, that's the latest UN figure from last April, 100 million metric tons of corn and grain are grown and put into biofuels that could be fed to human beings. She called it a human rights crime. The same UN report found that 758 million metric tons, which is about 860 million US tons, but that 758 million metric tons are fed to chickens and pigs and other farmed animals.